I was a couple weeks into my med school rotation in Salt Lake City and had the weekend off. I was applying for residency programs and needed to stay productive, but I desperately wanted to get out and explore. So, I decided to do both. The first step of any adventure is, of course, coffee. I made a full thermos to get me through the day, and then packed this in my backpack with all the other stuff I would need. A couple of meals, some snacks, and of course my iPad, which would allow me to do the writing and studying that I needed to do today. And with all that stuff packed up, I headed out, got in the car, and drove on down the highway to Big Cottonwood Canyon. For some reason, this weekend in the canyon was a lot less busy than the weekend prior, and so I got a spot fairly close to the trailhead. The trail that I'd be doing is called the Broads Fork Trail. It would be just over 2 miles to the spot that I'd be stopping, and over that, you gain about 2,100 feet of elevation, so certainly not a long hike, and that was kind of the point. I would get up into the mountains, find a spot to relax, and stay there until it was time to come back down later in the evening. I knew of a good spot just a little bit into the hike, off the trail to the right, where I could relax by a creek and drink my coffee, eat some breakfast, and that's exactly what I did. And after a little pleasant creekside coffee and breakfast, I got back on the trail and headed further up into the mountains. It wasn't too long after that, I walked around a bend in the trail, and just 3 feet off of the trail was a moose. But luckily, instead of charging me, the moose actually kind of backed up into the trees a little bit. And so, perhaps unwisely, I risked this opportunity to capture some photos. And so what was originally kind of this surprise and somewhat scary encounter turned into this sort of magical moment that I had all to myself. As I continued gaining elevation up the trail, I came into some what I think are cottonwood trees, and it kind of marks the point in the trail at which you're almost there. And indeed, not too far past this, I came around another bend in the trail, and then the trees stopped, the mountains grew more distant, and I emerged into this grand meadow in which I'd spend the rest of the day. After a few minutes of taking in the staggering views, I set up my little backpacking chair and settled in for a day of productivity in the mountains. I sat here in kind of the center of the meadow for about 20 minutes, and then I got really tired of the harsh sun, and so I packed everything up again and went in search of some shade. I walked just a few hundred yards off to my right and up this little mound of rock covered in wildflowers, and set up again, this time under the shade of a tree. I sat here reading and writing for a good 4 hours, remembering to look up from my iPad every few minutes. And eventually, feeling a little bit hungry, I made an early dinner. Chili mac with beef, if I recall. And after this early dinner, I did a little more reading, and then with the sun getting low in the sky, packed up and started my trek down. I made sure to take one last look at this meadow and the surrounding mountains that I'd had all to myself the entire day. I knew that this had been a rare experience, and certainly to this day, it's one that stands out prominently in my memory.